Afternoon, everybody. Again, for those of you that were in the first session and for those of you that are new to the second session, welcome. Just want to say thanks. I was kind of surprised, actually, really pleasantly so, at the real interest in doing this at this time of year. But I think for those of us that are trying to find ways to improve what we're doing in such a rapidly changing environment for spring for our students, I think it's worth the time. So again, I'm thankful for all of you to be here, for being here. I'm also thankful for Dawn for agreeing to take the lead on this afternoon's session on maintaining course consistency. Love the subtitle she came up with, When All Hell Breaks Loose, because if you're if it feels like that sometimes. So I think these are designed to be discussions. These are not designed to be presentations. So really looking for you to be engaged both, through open discussion as well as in the chat room. Also want to ask everybody real quickly if you could adjust the nameplate in your little Zoom box and just add your school to your name. That would be really helpful as well, just that we all know where everybody's coming from. And finally, I just want to thank also Fountainhead Press, who is going to, they're supporting this effort by sending everybody who is attending a gift certificate for a coffee, as well as holding a raffle for all of the sessions that you attend. You get a ticket in the raffle, and they're going to raffle off prizes next week for attendees. And I believe with each one of the three prizes, you're going to get a choice between a gift or a gift card. So, again, just really grateful for their support. I know that it's tough to find places to have community with each other. We're all kind of triaging as we go. And it's good to kind of have these opportunities to share what we did that worked, what we did that didn't, so that we can hopefully help each other going forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dawn. And again, thank you all. And I hope you find this to be a rewarding hour that you're spending with us.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate your efforts, your setup, your idea, and your follow through with this. And really excited that we were able to get this together. So welcome everyone to Maintaining Course Consistency When All Hell is Breaking Loose. I sent this note to Joe when we were preparing the session, and I said, "Is this too much?" And he's like, "No, it's really perfect." And if you're like me, that's kind of what the experience has been back in March and pretty much every day since, when all hell is breaking loose. So I thank Joe, and I also thank Susan and Fountainhead Press for their wonderful management of this situation and helping us out. And I'm also sending a shout out to my TA, Emily. She's on here. She's going to be helping us with admitting folks, managing the chat, and whatever else I need. So I invited Em to come and be a part of this with us today. So Em, I appreciate you. So thank you for all you do for me. So welcome everybody. As Joe mentioned, if you haven't already renamed yourself with your full name and your institution, we can use that then to help with the raffles down the line once our sessions are completed. And as a reminder, we are recording today's session. So I wanted to take an opportunity to just give you an idea of what we're going to do. And as Joe mentioned, we are making this a very loose conversation, and I have been in many conversations with folks nationally and regionally in the last few months, and it just seems that folks really just want to have an opportunity to share and talk. So there is really no formal need for a program here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up some breakout rooms in a few minutes. There are about 18 participants, and I think that'll make for a nice breakout room. And I'm going to provide this document in the chat. Em, if you would post that link for me. So what we're going to do is I'm going to send you to breakout rooms in a second. If everybody would open up that Google Doc, it's an opportunity to take some collaborative notes. You'll see that we're going to do 2 breakout rooms. So I'm going to get rid of the third one here. And we're going to have folks in our breakout rooms just talking a little bit about this concept of consistency. You might be coming to our conversation today from the role of being a course director, basic course director. You might have a number number of graduate students, adjuncts, folks working to manage your basic course, and you're trying to think about what does consistency mean. You might be trying to manage the different modalities that the folks on your campus are teaching in. You might be dealing with the changes in making content and assignments similar or consistent, or you might be dealing with trying to making sure that we're meeting goals and learning objectives. So whatever it is that you're dealing with, these are some things that we want to take an opportunity to discuss. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to provide this opportunity for two groups. I'll send you into two groups. We'll have these conversations, do them in smaller groups, and then we'll come back and we'll process them in a large group all together. So what I will do is I will send everybody to breakout rooms shortly, and I'll just ask that you go in and you just have these basic conversations. What does consistency mean to you? Maybe you can talk about what about this session piqued your interest and why you wanted to come, how that might be interesting to you to have to manage that, and how it might be useful for you to move forward as to what you can gain from these conversations. Maybe there's an opportunity to share resources. So it really is a very loose model that we're going with here, and it's just an opportunity for us to have a conversation. So if you'll bear with me for a second, I am going to stop sharing really quick, and I'm going to open up. Susan, I didn't check on the breakout rooms with you. Are you there, Susan Moore? Do you have breakout room control?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. So pretend that we just didn't have any of that conversation, and we're not going to do breakout rooms. We're just going to have a conversation here. So why don't we just take an opportunity to start having a conversation together? We'll go with one particular group here, and I'm going to go ahead and offer or invite anybody that might have something to share. So what does consistency mean to you? Does anybody want to take a stab at that really quickly?
Dawn, would you mind if I shared?
No. Hi, Margaret. Come on in.
Hi. So I guess, for me, I have tried to maintain consistency, and this isn't necessarily directly with, virtual learning, but just all learning in the fact that I've been going to conferences, virtual conferences still this semester. This is now my fourth one, honestly, semester, because I want to learn. And instead of canceling class, and of course, every college has a different policy on it. My college never really cares if a teacher's canceling class to go to a conference. But for me, I'm like, no, I can't cancel class when I'm away. They need to do something else. So I've been trying to maintain the consistency of attendance, even when I'm not there, by offering my students the chance to go to the tutoring and learning center on the days that I'm not there. I'm actually even trying to pre-schedule it in my classes if I know I'm going to be away at a conference, that this is a day that you're going to be researching and talking to the tutors about this class, or offering even a chance for the administration or, admissions to come in and offer to register or enroll or, do whatever they need to do, on the student support side. So I'm really trying to make sure that I don't cancel classes and that my students get consistency through constant showing up. Even when the instructor's not there, you still have stuff to do.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. And that's a really good point. And I think, as we go through this conversation, we're going to have lots of different examples of what consistency means to us. We're getting something in the chat from Jen from Young Harris College. She's saying, same. I always try to give them some content or supplemental opportunities and work when I'm not there. And I think that's really important. Thank you, Jen. Others of you, and everyone, please feel free to write in the collaborative document. I am happy to have helpers at that. So anybody that wants to put something in there, you are welcome to do so. What do the rest of you think? What are you thinking about when you're thinking about consistency and maintaining consistency? And what might have struck your attention about attending this session today? Anybody else? You can raise your hand. You can unmute yourself. Hi, Jessica, I see you.
Sure. Something that is on my plate right now, as in today, we have to make a decision, is consistency with attendance for students. So just sort of piggybacking off of what Margaret was saying, we started out this semester not in a high flex mode. The university was very clear that we wanted students in the seats, and we wanted lower level students in the seats, but we did not necessarily need to do the high flex. So we have, of course, at this point, we're now in a 10% in North Carolina, 10% rate of positivity, and so over the semester, students have just stopped coming for a variety of reasons, which we anticipated. And early on, we tried to be very fair and ethical and offer everybody the opportunity to move online if they wanted to. And then, of course, people have trickled out for various other reasons. And so now we are in a conundrum of how to maintain consistency and be ethical and fair across all different sections when we have some students who have been, and we only had hybrid, so we only had them coming for 50 minutes a week. Everything else is online. But some students have been coming every single week, and some students have not attended at all. So that was my question to bring today to the table, and how do we even create a consistent platform for student attendance in our current society?
I get that. And I think that that's something that a lot of people, may have been experiencing when we've been talking about this. So I'm going to ask that we put that into our document right now. We'll give some others a chance to offer their versions of consistency or their concerns, and then we can sort of talk through that, Jessica. Thank you so much. Let's see, Ariane, I can't remember how I said it earlier, and I know I was right. So she was drawn to this section considering there has been a lot of inconsistency during these unprecedented times. Yes, and if you're anything like me, that applies to every aspect of your life, and I would imagine that that's how it is for all of us. Anyone else have any input on consistency and what they might be thinking about? Anybody? And whoever's at it with the notes, I appreciate you. Please keep that up. Thank you. Anne, hi, I see you.
Hi. A big thing for us was thinking about consistency of speech delivery experience too. Are we recording? Are we having them deliver it synchronously? How do we make the online speech delivery experience compatible to what students in our face-to-face sections would get? So that's kind of a big challenge that we've confronted in the area of consistency.
Yep, and I know that that's something that I'm talking to a lot of people about in the different spaces that I'm interacting in. Thank you, Anne. I appreciate you sharing that. Anybody else? Is there one more person that wants to add before we start breaking down some of these things? Doyle, what are you saying here? An Office 365 campus, and I've been trying for several semesters to roll out the use of Microsoft Teams as an email replacement, and students really loathe answering emails. Amen, Doyle. I appreciate that. Two things came out of that. I learned a lesson about lecturing online, and this fall we've been simulcasting on Teams. Interesting. Doyle, tell us a little bit about that.
The lesson I learned was back in March, I just went on with the calendar that we've been keeping to. We just met through Teams meetings, and I would give lectures, and for a while they found that comforting. And then because it was the old familiar routine, and they saw their classmates. Then after a few weeks, it really got to where it wasn't effective. And I decided over the summer, if we had to go to no face-to-face meetings, that we were going to completely change it up and not lecture anymore. The other thing, though, was talking about how to be consistent between people who can be in class and haven't been in class. What we've been doing, and we're a very small campus, is we've just been simulcasting all of our classes. So if you're in the room, you hear class happening, but you can join on Teams, and we wear lapel mics, and just every meeting of the class is a Teams meeting, and you can join it.
That's neat. Was there a reason why you went with the Teams versus doing that in Zoom?
Chiefly because we're an Office 365 campus, they all have a Teams account already. And then there are some other things like file sharing and so forth. And when all of that is built in together, then they don't get this kind of fatigue system of, okay, here's another platform we have to learn. And we do use Zoom sometimes because the video is much better. But we use Teams quite a bit.
Okay, that's good. I appreciate that. I'm a hardcore Teams user on my campus in a lot of my spaces. I haven't done it for my classroom though. It seems that Zoom has been the way. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's an interesting concept. And the concept of simulcasting class is interesting also. I'm gonna have to think through that a little bit. I love it. Thank you, Doyle. Anybody else have anything to add before we start breaking down some of these things? Jen's offering that there's a bit of a 365 contract issue. Oh, so you're saying that you have to use the 365, so Zoom is not appropriate on your campus. Oh, all the rules that we have to jump through. All right, well, I think that we have some good places to get started with here. So what I'd like to do is ask everybody to take a look at our document. Again, if you would go ahead and post the link one more time so folks can see that. Let's talk a little bit about first, let's talk through the attendance for students. Is there anybody that has anything to offer some of the comments about attendance and how that's been managed on your campuses or how you're managing that? Anybody? Or additional frustrations about attendance? While you're thinking about that, one of the things that I did on my campus here in Penn State Berks in Reading, Pennsylvania, I started off using a mixed mode where I was doing a roomies and a zoomies. So on Mondays, I had group A in the room and group B on Zoom, and Wednesdays it was the opposite. And students started getting lazy when they were supposed to be in the room as roomies. And they took the opportunity to then start being zoomies. And at first I got a little frustrated with that, but then I realized that, you know what, they're getting the learning whether they're physically coming to the class or not, as opposed to a normal semester pre-COVID where students would just not show up and they wouldn't get the learning. So I reframed that for myself, and I was able to be comfortable with the fact that my students were learning even though they may not be physically present. So we worked through that a little bit. Anybody else have attendance things that they're working on? Feel free to raise your hand or just unmute and join us. Jen's talking about reframing has been so important for her to function, and I appreciate that. Jen, is there anything more you want to add on that? And then I'll go to Jessica after you, Jen.
Thanks. Yeah, just reframing, just really, I think it's a lot about resetting my expectations for what success looks like, both on my part and for the students. I've really had to redefine that and reframe what learning, what is important in terms of the learning as opposed to my own ego, for example.
Yeah, and yeah, whew, good for you, because that's not always an easy thing. I appreciate that. Thank you, Jen. Jessica.
Yes, and I don't have answers. I guess that's why I'm asking the group. I think for us, I'm just honestly ethically torn at this point, because we, the great idea is to do the simultaneous, broadcasting. Again, we did not do that because they wanted students in the seats to make sure that students were in the dorms so that we could pay bills. So we had all those issues going on. I'm primarily, most of our classes are taught by GTAs, and that's, managing an in-class as well as online was a skill set that most of them were just honestly not really ready for. These are master's students, very young. And so, we didn't do it. We did create some ways for people to compensate. So like if they could, obviously for COVID and other situations where they could just, they could write about what was happening in class that day. They could write a little short essay, all that sort of thing to compensate for the attendance if needed. But students just didn't do it. So they just opted out. And I think additionally, and maybe some other people were feeling this, as a communication course, we put a lot of credit into attendance and participation, whereas I think a lot of other disciplines on campus just basically said, come or don't come, do whatever you feel like doing. And so that narrative started to become part of, especially, incoming students, started to become part of the narrative for CST. And so now we're kind of stuck in the sense that we have some students who, we have some students who have completed all the work online because we couldn't have them interacting in the classroom. So we had to have them completed online, but they literally have not attended a class. So they're getting an A or B online, but they haven't ever come. But we have students who have shown up every classroom and every class, and they have the same grade. So in our syllabus, it says normally we would deduct 4 absences. And we've been very generous with that. And, we've really extended that and really increased the number that they can meet, but still some of them will fail, yet they've completed all the work and on paper have an A or B.
Yeah, and that's so hard because, COVID, right? And how that impacts all of us in our individual personal lives. It's just so hard. And I don't have a good answer.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like to look up at my campus and the mothership at Penn State University to see how, what are they saying? And then how can I structure my learning objectives, my course goals, the way I manage my class to be accountable to a higher power, right? So I don't have to ultimately be responsible. And I think that, those of us that work with GTAs or, teaching assistants in some ways, that is something that's really important, right? We have to make sure that there is that level of accountability above to hold that true. Thank you. I appreciate that, Jessica. Yeah. No right answers, no wrong answers, just works.
Yeah.
Others have feedback on here. I see that there's a note from Erica that I want to read, but I don't want to miss somebody if they have a comment. Erica's saying that is tricky because we aren't allowed to require attendance via Zoom. Neither are we, Erica. So that means all instructors are giving quizzes and or discussions that are graded, which means students are getting bombarded with weekly assignments that they didn't have before. So keeping consistency with workload in conjunction with attendance is an issue. I get that too. That was really hard when we made the pivot back in March for many of my colleagues. Because they were trying to, make sure that there was the accountability piece in the content, because you're not in the classroom and having the dialogue sharing, but students were really starting to feel like they had all of this work to do. There's a school of thought out there from some learning designers that I know that there's really not that much more, but because not much more work, but because there are these more detailed and point related accountability checks, these quizzes, these discussions, students are finding more and more that they have to stay on top of the reading as they go, as opposed to cramming in all the reading and then having to put it out in a test at midterm or maybe 3 times a semester or a final. So there's lots of different thought processes on that. What other thoughts do we have out here, everyone? I want to go back to, time management is not their strongest skill. Yep, and I would contend that in many cases that's the issue, is that they're finding is that it's the time management, not necessarily that it's more work. Let me peek at our document really quickly here. Let's talk a little bit about the speech delivery experience. Who wants to talk about making the transition from in-person speeches to online speeches? Have you gone asynchronous? Have you done speeches via Zoom? Have you had videos recorded, submitted in different ways? Let's talk a little bit about that. Anybody want to offer what they're doing?
Well, since I mentioned this one originally, I can share what we're doing, at least as a start. We're teaching our classes asynchronously and doing recordings of the major speeches. We have many speeches and some instructors are doing those recorded and some are doing them synchronously. We've kind of given people a choice. Our big concern was just technology accessibility and wanting to make sure that students didn't have to necessarily be online at a certain time, because none of our courses had a time listing in the course catalog too. And that's been working fairly well, although I would say the big challenge is just the technology, sort of navigating the technology to make sure that students have high quality recordings. So part of the feedback we give along the way is feedback on the use of technology, which I think you'd have in asynchronous or synchronous environments. And part of it is, and most of it is on the quality of the speech delivery, of course. So that's what we're doing this semester, but I'm definitely interested in what other folks have tried out too.
That's good.
Yeah.
I have some things I can offer, but I will wait to see if others have some input on this. Comment, we only run public speaking in the spring, so we did speeches synchronously over Zoom. It worked because everyone had done the basic speeches by then and had a foundation of simple skills. That's a good point. But a few students with unreliable Wi-Fi had technology stress. Yeah, on top of that's the worst. Adding all of these things. When I did my Zoom speeches in the spring, I had one of my students went home to Puerto Rico, and he had a good time of giving his speech in my 8 o'clock class up against the roosters that lived next door to him. Like literally, there was a farm of roosters that had a bunch of roosters. So we had some fun with that, and we just kind of reframed it again with the reframing. Reframe that as being this happens. This stuff kind of happens, and you have to be able to roll with it. Others have some thoughts. Hi, Ann.
Hi, one other thing I might add, I knew there was something else I was going to add, was that something we're thinking about for the spring is, since we still will be doing the recording of the speeches and the asynchronous delivery, but we're trying to think about ways to make the peer feedback aspect more meaningful and active, since it's not happening simultaneously, but we still want to make sure that students are exposed to their peer speeches, feel like they're getting engagement from a meaningful audience in that online setting too. So if other folks have things that you've done that have worked for that, I'd be curious to hear how you've implemented those ideas.
Yeah, one of the things that I do, whether it's in a synchronous speech or an asynchronous uploaded with a video in my online classes, is I provide a discussion board, and they have to, we use Canvas as our LMS, and the student has to put their speech link into the discussion board, and then that's part 1 of the assignment. And then part 2 of the assignment is they have to answer 4 or 5 questions for 4 or 5 different speakers. So that assures that they go through and they watch 4 or 5 different speeches and then answer really specific questions about that speech. So it's not some generic stuff. So by just the fact that I've already seen the speeches, I can tell whether the students are watching the speeches and answering it based on that. So that's worked really well for me. Others have that peer review piece. I know in some of the Facebook groups that I'm a part of, I see that coming up often, actually. I don't think anyone has solved that 100% yet. Does anybody have any feedback about that? Oh, I have a couple of comments here. Jen says, I use a first responder assignment to capitalize on the value of that role IRL and for feedback. That also helps spread the comments. That's good. And then Nicole says, I met with students once a week for 50 minutes and they record speeches. We use the video sharing platform Acclaim so students can provide peer reviews. Nicole, is that peer review just go right into the Acclaim software?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not familiar with that one, but it sounds similar to I've used Go React in the past. So that sounds interesting. Anybody else have done anything differently with synchronous versus asynchronous? Well, while you're thinking about that, I'll offer another thing that has worked well for me. I've been teaching my public speaking course, one section a semester online for about 4 semesters prior to COVID. And of course, there was some learning that took place every semester. I made some tweaks, like, for example, in the requirements, I had to put, please don't deliver your speech on a bus backwards on your way to Washington, D.C., or please don't have the cat walk in front of the computer, just silly things like that. But one of the things that I do is I do offer the opportunity for them to either submit a video meeting very specific requirements for having a live audience, or I provide a number of times where they can come and meet with a group of their peers and myself in a Zoom session that I record. And I offer different times for that. And that has worked really well for me this semester, especially because I have a number of international students that are not back in the United States this semester. So I offer sessions as early as 6 a.m. I've done a couple of 6 a.m. I figure I'm up, I might as well offer that. 8 p.m., different times throughout the day that meets the different needs in terms of time zones for my students. And it really is a great way for, well, as Anne is pointing out, it gives a flexible delivery option for the students. And it also gives the students an opportunity to see each other. And selfishly, I would much rather watch a speech live than have to watch recordings of speeches. That's just me selfishly. And I've learned that along the way. So that gives me an opportunity to at least watch 10 of the 24 speeches that I have to watch for that section live. Let me see a couple of things that come in. The audience component, that has been another consistency challenge. Yes, Jessica, I know that's something that I've been experiencing a lot of issues with, even though I call out that they need to have 5 adults 16 and older and tell them that they have to say hello at the beginning and the end of the speech. I have been I struggled with whether or not I take points off for allowing younger audiences or no audience. So that's something that I struggle with and I deal with a lot. So I'm happy to hear if anybody else has had some specific audience components that have worked well for them. Anybody? I don't want to be the only one talking here. So if anybody has feedback, I am happy to hear it. And whoever is in the notes document and staying up with that, I super appreciate you. All right, how we doing?
I use the same thing that you do. I do I'm going to turn my video on here.
Okay, Jen.
Hi. I also do 5 adults, or I basically say your peers or older. So if I have a dual enrollment student who's in high school, then their classmates would count. And I really haven't had any trouble. I do sometimes have to do a case-by-case situation where a student says, well, I've only got my parents with me and our dog, and so I do that kind of case by case. But for the most part, students are able to meet that requirement. And on pre-COVID times, if they couldn't, I would tell them to go to a public place and just do the speech in a way that people could hear if they wanted to stop and listen. And that was always fun. Very few students took that opportunity, of course, but.
I appreciate your flexibility, Jen. That's I really appreciate that. Tim, I see you turned your camera on. Do you have something to offer for us?
We've also done where our students have uploaded their video to YouTube and kind of unlisted it and then shared it with family or friends. And then those family or friends had to leave comments.
Ah.
So it's maybe a couple things, maybe peer feedback you could get that way too.
Mhm.
I know not everyone likes to use YouTube, but especially because of COVID and getting with more people is not advised. That's been a way we've kind of worked around it.
That's a great idea. And like I said, that's something that I've been struggling with because I really put a lot of value in those paper peer evaluations that I would have them fill out and then literally hand back. So it was an almost immediate feedback for the students right away on their speech day, as opposed to waiting a week for mine. So I miss that. So I've been looking for that. My Emily, please make that comment about the comments in an unlisted YouTube video in our document for me, please. Let's see. Jen, are you back on camera, or did you want to comment again, or did you not turn yourself off? Okay, sorry. Good. Let's see who else here. Jessica saying that they completely eliminated audience for this semester. It wasn't going to be feasible for us to require. I know, Jessica, that's such an interesting thing, and I have batted that around a little bit, and I've really looked at the learning outcomes for my course, and I think I might move towards that if I have a little bit of wiggle room with my learning outcomes. I appreciate that. Thanks so much. And Nicole is saying optional, recommended, but optional. Most students opted for no audience. I appreciate that too. One of the things that I did, I piloted this summer, and then I tried it again this fall, was for one of their earlier speeches using the tool, the app Flipgrid. I don't know if any of you have ever used Flipgrid, but I had them record it. It felt very similar to me for those of you that use either Snapchat or TikTok. I won't make you raise your hand if you use TikTok, but I have kids in my house, so I do the TikToking with them. But the Flipgrid app has made me feel very similar to some of the things that the traditional college age students are using right now. So, Jessica, did you want to comment?
Sure. I was just going to say, we thought long and hard about the audience piece too. And one thing that we are trying to do is move all of our online classes, and this really gave us the push to really just embrace online communication, right? And if you are going to deliver a speech, then you might deliver it as a video, something you might create for YouTube if you're a YouTuber or whatnot. But actually just embrace it as online communication. We still have them go back, as people mentioned. We have a claim, and so they're required to go back and watch student videos and provide constructive feedback. So we still get that piece. But yeah, I think it worked out okay. So, we'll see.
That's good. I appreciate that. And I know for those of you that are familiar with the basic course directors and that you do some work in this space or on the listserv at all, Pat Gerke provides a lot of information about the online communication, and he has some excellent resources. And I've done a lot of tweaking to my stuff based on some of the research and the stuff that he's done, and that's really what he comes. And I'm going to totally dumb this down, but he's basically saying that the platform oratory that we may have grown up with is not necessarily the only thing, and being able to come at it, as Jessica was saying, from that embracing the online, that reframing the online communication. Thanks, Anne, is also something that's really important. And the other thing that for me is really unique and interesting, as I'm dealing with more and more of the online conversations in my space, the concept of the skills are the same. whether you're dealing with a group of people, as I am right now, 19 of you in a black box here, or if I would have 19 of you in a conference room, or across a table at a basic course directors conference and our roundtable conversations, the skills are the same, whether it's regardless of how your modality. And I think that that's an important frame for us too. So does anybody have any thoughts about that? Disagree, agree? And you can disagree with me, and I have no problems with that. Let's see, Richard's saying here, we can make them write a target audience plan as well, get them to think about their voluntary audience. I like that, Richard. That's a really good idea. One of the assignments that I do that I've used in my online class is to have them think about the audience. And I think that maybe that target audience as a plan is a really good idea. I'm going to be snatching that up, Richard. Thank you very much. Who else? What other things about consistency are you struggling with? Are you throwing around right now? What made you decide to come today's session? What else can we talk about here today? Anybody? A burning question that you're just dying to get answered or to get sympathy on? What can I do for you? What could we bring up? All right, while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to peep at our thing. Consistency of attendance, we talked through that. Consistency, those physically present through online space, workload. So tell me a little bit about this. Does anybody have any experience with dealing with plagiarism and this newly found COVID version of life that we're all dealing with? Has there been any plagiarism issues that have cropped up, and are you dealing with that differently than you might have before March? Has anybody had to deal with that? Well, that's good news. I haven't either, actually. I've gotten pretty lucky this. Oh, I shouldn't say it. There's still 2 weeks left, but knock on wood, this semester I've been pretty lucky with that. How about office hours? How are you guys managing office hours and being consistent with office hours when you can't really have folks dropping into your physical office space? Anybody have any fun ways that they've managed office hours? How about this? Raise your hand or your finger or your little reaction thing. Give us a reaction. Oh, Candidly, I like that. Yep. I do office hours either on Teams video chat or outdoors at a picnic table. I like that, Doyle, if the weather cooperates. Zoom with a waiting room, that's worked well. That's what I've done a couple of times. I've also used, we're an Office 365 facility here too, and I've used Booking to create my office hours instead of just drop in. I usually open my office Zoom room during my office hours, but that way students have a little bit more accountability if they're actually signing up for an appointment, and that's worked really well. Anybody else have any creative ways that they've done office hours? I set office hours on Zoom every week and people signed up. Was not as popular, but I was thinking of applying bi-weekly check-ins with students next semester. Ariane, I think that's a really good idea. That's one of the things that I'm really missing is those check-ins that you get in the physical classroom before and or after class for those that sort of straggle in early or take their time packing up, or even sometimes wind up in a class in the next hour in the classroom that I'm leaving. That has been a good thing. And Tim is asking, are students still coming to office hours? What are you folks seeing? Are students still coming to office hours? Yes, weekly check-ins. They have to do it by voice or video, even if it's 30 seconds. I love that. Excuse me. One of the things that has been consistent for me, Tim, and that's before COVID and not, is my office hours get much more busy after the first major speech rubrics get handed back and they realize, oh, I really do need to be listening to her and putting more effort in there. So I got more students in office hours virtually than when I was on campus. Erica, that's interesting. I wonder why that is. I get face-to-face office visits and really appreciate the human contact. And I wish that I had the opportunity. I can be in my office. I just can't have folks here. Anna's commenting, I've had work days where I'm on Zoom the whole class time. I've had students drop into those to quickly ask a question, but they haven't come to office hours. All right. Yeah, it's weird, right? Opening up the Zoom room and kind of just going about your day. One of the things that I do randomly is I will do a pop-up Zoom office hour where I will post across all of my classes, whether it's my first year seminar class or my speech classes. I'll post, hey, I'm going to be logging into Zoom. Join me in my Zoom room. I'll be on for the next 20 minutes. And I get an actual lot of folks when I do that randomly. So lots of good stuff in the chat here. Please feel free to keep that going. I always have meetings scheduled during office hours when I was on campus. So it was always much harder for me to find when I was on campus. Yeah, I get that. Things get scheduled and then you have to go ahead and manage changing your office hours. That's one of the reasons why I went with the bookings app for office hours, because I can manage my Outlook calendar, that if I have to put a meeting on there, it will take the availability of those office hour times, and then it'll take from some other times that I am available. So it gives a little bit more flexibility. I like the idea of check-ins too, Tim. What you want to comment for us, what you might think that might look like for you, maybe moving forward? Do you have any ideas?
I don't know. I think I've thought a little bit about it, because I feel like my students aren't coming to my Zoom office hours as frequently. They'll email me questions. They won't come to my office hours. And so instead, if they email me, I'll say, let's pop on Zoom now. Like, let's just get on if I'm on the computer. So that's how I get them into my office hours. But I think just maybe if I don't know, check-ins after assignments or before assignments are due, maybe scheduling that in. We're teaching more hybrid, so if there's a day we're not in class, maybe I'm meeting with half the students. And I like the appointments too. I've done more appointments this year than I find students are more accountable that they have this 15-minute appointment to show up, versus you can show up anytime between this hour and have to maybe wait if you're meeting with someone else.
Yep. And I think when you're putting the appointments together, I think it also teaches them a level of accountability that happens for us as adults, right? In the world, we're scheduling time. You're scheduling time with somebody else, a boss, a colleague, a supervisor, somebody else. And that, I think it's good. It's good modeling, I think, too. And that's another byproduct for me that has come out of that too.
Yeah. And I think too, who said it? Tim French said that, do you think we'll go back to regular office hours? I found that my students still right now would love for us to meet in person versus via Zoom. They're kind of zoomed out too.
Yep.
So I think some of our students still want to meet in person.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I see Doyle's commenting about the Teams chat, and I find that the chat, you can get that app on your phone, and that works very similarly to you be texting somebody. And I think that meets many of our traditional age college students where they are right now. So I think there's some value in that. So yay on you, Doyle. Ariana's saying she received a lot of same emails from students since they're not the regular class time, right? Those questions that you're answering over and over. And you use GroupMe for your class to ask questions, and I'll see your responses. I think that's a really great idea. And in terms of that, also, one of the things that I have, I don't know if anybody else does this for consistency, I have a Word document or 4 that has all of the different responses that I'm giving for questions that are asked. Does anybody use that? So you just copy and paste different answers based on the question. You might have to tweak it. Anybody ever do that, or is that just me? Oh, all right, maybe it's just me. Oh, okay. Thanks, Nicole. I appreciate that. All right, Anne does that too. All right, I appreciate it. Good. Well, what else is on your mind here with the last 15 minutes? Are there any burning questions about consistency, about working with GTAs or other folks, maintaining learning outcomes and course outcomes and different modalities? Is there anything else that we can talk about? Just want to give everybody the opportunity to get something valuable. Maybe some folks that we haven't heard from yet. Do you want to offer anything? Just going to peek back at our document here. Looking back at that comment of the office hours and the check-ins, has anybody ever canceled a class period just to do conferencing? Just for those check-ins, forcing students instead of coming to class to meet with you for those 10 minutes? Have you ever done that? see where things are, like a temperature check of students, where they are in the process? Pros and cons to that? Done that once or twice, and I've had pretty good value. Lauren, I see you.
Yes, we do a workshop week actually to answer that question.
Okay.
I had another question though that popped up today when I was meeting with my graduate students related to consistency. And one of them was we require students to record and submit their speeches. They are all due, for consistency to me means at a certain deadline every time, which happens to be Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Which means, and I counted this last go round, 60% submitted after 10 o'clock on Sunday night, and it's not working. So I was very curious to know, were there other deadlines that were working for other folks that might be a good suggestion to prevent the procrastination, or perhaps push the procrastination up to a point where they are at least fresher when they're submitting their speeches.
Well, that's what I was going to ask first. Tell us a little bit about why you're saying it's not working. Like, what does that mean to you?
It means to me that they are, their grades are very poor. They're procrastinating. However, when they're working at 11 p.m., it's not their finest hour. So I'm looking for ways, maybe suggestions, ideas for promoting good time management, or a better deadline, a consistent deadline that would promote perhaps a better reflection of their skills and abilities.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate that. Looks like Jessica might have something to add. Jessica?
Maybe something to add, but something that also didn't work. So we had the hybrid thing again. And what that actually meant was we had half of the students coming on Monday, half of the students coming on Wednesday, and then everything else was online. So we tried to avoid the one deadline by having two deadlines for every group. So like the Monday class would have I think like a Friday and a Sunday deadline, two different deadlines throughout the week. The challenge there was that for those instructors, each instructor for one class then had like 4 different deadlines. Does that make sense? So it's like just the instructor trying to convey the information to the students was really, really challenging, because even I had no idea. I was like, what group are we talking about? A, B, we have no idea when their stuff is due. So it spread it out a little bit. Like they would take a quiz, like a little video quiz kind of a thing before class time, and then they would respond for the next deadline. So we tried to keep it sort of scaffolded, but it was a lot to keep in mind.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And Lauren, I see there's a couple of suggestions coming through in the chat. An earlier deadline. Is there a reason why that you have to keep it with 11:59, or just because that's what the default is?
That's just what I came up with. So there's nothing tying me to that deadline. It was when I taught online, that was a consistent deadline that I utilized that worked well with synchronous, and in this weird environment that we're in, I'm just seeing and receiving feedback that it's not working as well.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. Maybe a combination of an extra 2 or 3 points for a speech that meets this deadline, which is at 5 p.m. And, you still get full credit if it's in by midnight. But if you wait until midnight, even put that into your requirements. I have noticed that people are not as fresh and their grades are not as consistent, and just be honest from that perspective. What else was there that in here that I saw someone commented about having them submit speech outlines earlier, and I really like that as an idea too. I typically have outlines due on their speech day at 11:59, but that might be a good way. Excuse me.
Yeah, that is a great idea. Their outlines are due on Wednesday at 11:59. Speeches due on Sunday at 11:59. For some reason, their speeches are done, right? But they still want to rehearse a whole bunch, I guess.
One of the things from the learning design community, we'll talk about the concept of backwards design and then scaffolding assignments. And so maybe you could look at your overall assignment and see if you can scaffold it into smaller chunks along the way. Maybe one of those things is to have them hand in a draft outline 10 days before, and then 8 days before hand in a video clip of their introduction, and maybe get some peer review comments on that. And then maybe 4 days before, have them hand in a video clip of their conclusion, right? And sort of scaffold that in smaller chunks, which is forcing, I'm just coming up with this on the fly. So Emily, remind me that I had this idea. And maybe that can help you with getting folks to be a little bit more fresh and meeting your expectations a little bit better. And the other thing that I always say is, no matter how many times I tell them what the best practice is, 60% of them are going to wait to the last minute and not follow through with the best practice. And that, I think that's just students, and that's just going to happen. I don't necessarily think I have to settle for that. And I think something else that I try to do is I kind of teach to the median student, the middle, right? There are students that are going to be the ones that should be in the honors level class and that are always asking the questions that you're like, oh, well, let me tell you more about that. And then there's the students that really don't give a rat's butt about it. And they just want to get their C and get through, and, they'll put their check in the box. You just try to offer as many different options as possible to get them motivated. And be okay with the fact that you're not always going to have them motivated, which is a tricky thing. Let's see. Doyle's saying that he does that. I'm not sure which that, but maybe draft version of the outline is due 7 days out. Post it as an attachment to a discussion post in the forum. Point out to everyone 2 or 3 students who did a really good job. I love that. I think that the opportunity to provide that model is really important. I provide in all of my speech assignments a sample or 2 of an actual speech video and the accompanying outline. I provide that as samples, and not everybody watches it. I watch the analytics on that all the time, and people don't always do it. But of course, the ones that do are the ones that rise above and excel in that situation. What other comments do we have? We have about 7 minutes before we have to wrap up. Ariane is saying, how do you adjust your classes when ideas, concepts are not working without disrupting the structure you have set? I see something's not working, would like to switch it. I worry about how the change could affect students or make it more difficult for them. I have a really great answer for that, but I don't want to take it. Does anybody have anything they'd like to offer her? So Ariane, one of the things, if we're waiting for anybody else, is that I provide an opportunity for my students to comment, right? What I would do is I would put a quick survey together, post that out and say, look, I see this as an issue, something that I want to tweak. I'm either thinking about doing choice A or choice B, and let them make the decision as to whether or not they want the choice A and choice B. And I say, these are the reasons why, and I try to give them as much buy-in to that as possible. And Jessica, it seems to be saying the same thing here. That is tricky, and especially I find in the online space, it's harder to make some of these changes than it would be in the physical classroom. I have found that to be a little bit more tricky. Anybody else have anything they want to offer or add? How about this? How about those of you that would have a commute to campus to go into the classroom, that you found yourself missing that drive to work, where you're sort of thinking about what the lecture of the day is going to be and how that might be tweaked just based on what's going on in the world, and you can't be as responsive or flexible with that because of the online space that we're in? Does anybody else miss that? And if so, or if not, if you figured out a way to accommodate that, I would be happy to hear how you manage that. I missed that, the driving in the morning, sort of thinking about what's coming up on the day, what I'm going to talk about, and did anything happen yesterday or over the weekend that I could make it a little bit fresh? Yeah, and I appreciate that, Nicole. Your podcast consumption has gone way down. I appreciate that. What else can I do for everybody here? What else can we talk about in the next few minutes? I'm just going to share my screen once more here. It's encouraging to hear not the only one who brews up. No, Doyle, that's it. I get more ideas in the commute than I do anywhere else. That's kind of where my stuff comes from. I'm trying to find my document here. There we are. All right. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to add as we're coming to a conclusion? I am really, really appreciative of this experience that we've had today. Just really have an opportunity to chat with folks, like-minded folks that want to be involved in these conversations. It's really refreshing to me that everybody is still sort of feeling enthusiastic and enough to want to come to a session and on Monday after Thanksgiving at 2:30 on the East here, and I really appreciate that. As we're coming to a conclusion, we will be posting this recording. Susan will be doing that for us from Fountainhead in a couple of days on that original website that was sent out with the sign up for today's session. Feel free to keep in touch with me if there's anything that I can do for you. I have a bunch of ways to contact me here. Feel free to reach out. Thank you, Susan posted the link there. I didn't have that handy. If there's anything I can do to reach out, or you can reach out and touch base with me in reference to basic course stuff or any of the things, crazy things that I'm doing, I would love to engage with you in any ways that I can support you. And I thank you all for coming today. And I'll hang out for a minute or two, but I believe this Zoom room will be closing shortly for the next session. And again, I appreciate Emily, my sidekick here, and I thank you to Joe and to Susan, to everybody else at Fountainhead for making this a great opportunity to chat. Thanks, everybody.